Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Tariq Amin, lecturer, Department of English, Kohat University of Science and Technology, Kohat. Our today's topic is reading techniques, extensive and intensive reading. This is the 14th lecture of the course Study Skills. The course code is ENG123. Lecture outlines include extensive reading, strengths, advantages of extensive reading, shortcomings, disadvantages of extensive reading. After discussing extensive reading, we will discuss intensive reading, and then strengths and advantages of intensive reading, then shortcomings or disadvantages of intensive reading, and at the very end of the class we will discuss some of the differences between extensive and intensive reading. Learning objectives of today's class are: the students will be able to know about extensive and intensive reading, and they will also be able to understand the difference between extensive and intensive reading. Let's discuss extensive reading. Extensive reading involves learner reading text for enjoyment and to develop general reading skills. When we read extensively, most of the time our purpose is enjoyment. We try to read different texts extensively for the purpose of enjoyment, for our own joy. For pleasure purposes, we read different texts extensively. And we also read different texts extensively in order to develop our general reading skills. Sometimes it is also called reading for joy, or reading for enjoyment, or reading for pleasure purposes. To read extensively is to simply read as much as possible without concerning oneself with the meaning of the unknown word. When we read a particular text extensively, we are not concerned with the very meaning of each and every word. We are not concerned with the meaning of each and every difficult phrase. We are not concerned with the meaning of each and every difficult sentence. We just try to get the overall meaning of a text. Reading easy reading material. We try to read such material that is easy to read, and it is reading for enjoyment and information. Sometimes we read extensively for enjoyment purpose, and a part of reading something extensively for enjoyment purposes, we also read different texts for information purposes, as well for getting information purposes, as well. For example, sometimes we read newspapers for the purpose of information. Sometimes we read other posts for the purpose of information. Learners choose what they want to read. Most of the time when students read extensively, they are free to select anything. They select text of their own choice. They are free to select anything. They choose what they want to read. Learners read as much as possible. Faster reading. This is obviously a faster reading, requiring a low expenditure of mental effort. This is a very much important point. In contrast to intensive reading, this reading technique, this reading method, this reading strategy, which is extensive reading, it requires low expenditure of mental effort, because in such sort of reading we are not concerned with the minute detail of different phrases, different sentences. We are just concerned with the overall meaning of such texts. That is why it is said that extensive reading requires a low expenditure of mental effort. Now there are some objectives of extensive reading. For example, the objectives of extensive reading are to develop the habit of self-study in the students. This extensive reading helps students develop self-study, the habit of self-study, and to enable the students to understand the meaning of the given passage as early as possible. It enables the students to do so. They try to understand the meaning of a particular given difficult passage. They try to get meaning of that very passage as early as possible to increase the passive vocabulary of the students. Now there are some differences between passive vocabulary and active vocabulary, but we will discuss the difference between passive vocabulary and active vocabulary in the next class. Important aspects of extensive reading. The first one is text must be interesting. When you read a particular, when you select a text for enjoyment purposes, or you select a text to be read extensively, the text should be interesting. Text must be level appropriate. You should select a text of your own level. It should be according to your own level. If you are a student of 10th grade or 12th grade, you should select a text that is appropriate to the students of 12th grade. You shouldn't select a text that have been written different texts that have been written for MPhil scholars or PhD scholars, because you would not be able to understand and comprehend that text. So you should select a text that is according to your level, or that is level appropriate. Text must be of moderate length. You should not select very short text, and you shouldn't select very lengthy text. Now there are some advantages of extensive reading. It helps widen the vocabulary of these students. When you read extensively, you come across different difficult and unknown words. So such words become part of your passive vocabulary. It helps enhance your vocabulary. It help you develop your vocabulary. Inculcates the habit of self-study in the students. We have discussed this advantage in the previous slide as well, that extensive reading helps students develop the habit of self-study. Finish books in reasonable time. This is also one of the advantages of extensive reading, that it helps you finish different books in different assigned texts in reasonable time. Provides us pleasure. This is also one of the advantages. Now this technique has also got some disadvantages. In this technique, language learning autonomy is needed. No short-term outcome. In extensive reading, we don't have short-term outcome. And selecting materials is difficult. When you select a text for enjoyment purpose, it becomes difficult for you to select a text. So you face some difficulties in selecting text for yourself, because you are free to select anything. You have got freedom. You are free to select a text of your own choice. So sometimes you face difficulties in selecting a text for yourself that you read for enjoyment purposes. Vocabulary and grammar, as discussed in the previous slide, that when we read a text extensively, we are not concerned with the vocabulary of the text, and we are not concerned with the very grammar of a text. We don't focus on each and every word. We don't focus on each and every structure that is used in a particular text and in a particular book. We are just concerned with the overall meaning of a text. We just try to get pleasure. We read such text extensively for enjoyment purpose, for pleasure purpose, and we don't focus upon the different words that are used in a particular text. We are not concerned with the different phrases and sentence structures. That is why we learn limited vocabulary, and we don't learn grammar rules that much. And in comparison to intensive, we talk of intensive reading, In intensive reading, we can learn large number of vocabulary and we can learn grammar as well when we read intensively. As we learn more grammar and more vocabulary in intensive reading as compared to extensive reading. Lack of feeling of learning English. You feel that you are not learning English language, your language learning is not being improved. This is what you feel when you read something extensively. Intensive reading, the second reading strategy is intensive reading. Intensive reading means that these are very much important points. Keep these points in your mind. That intensive reading means that the readers take a text, you take a particular text. It might be your academic text, your course text, or a particular assignment or a particular text given by your teacher. You just take a text, study it line by line. Keep this in mind that when you read a text intensively, you read it line by line. You focus on each and every word, you focus on each and every phrase, you focus on each and every clause, you focus upon each and every sentence. You study it line by line. You study the minute detail of the text and refer at every moment to the dictionary about the grammar of the text itself. When you read something intensively, you might come across words, you might come across difficult words, so you consult dictionary for it. And sometimes you come across some structures that you don't know, or if some come across some new structures, so you look and you refer to dictionary, you consult different dictionaries for it, you consult your teacher for it, you consult your class fellows, your group members and your teachers, etc. for the grammar of the text and for the different difficult words. To read intensively is to completely deconstruct a text. When you read something intensively, you completely deconstruct it, you completely analyze it with the goal of absorbing as much meaning from it as possible. You try to get more and more meaning from it. You try to derive more and more meaning out of a particular passage, out of a particular text. Important aspects of intensive reading are: text must be interesting. Once again, when you read, you select a text for intensive reading, your text must be interesting. Try to select a text that is interesting. If you select a text that is not interesting, you will get bored very soon. Text must be short. It must not be lengthy text. It must be short. You should read intensively when you have the most mental energy, because in intensive reading you require most mental energy. You require mental energy. So you should read intensively when you have most mental energy. Read for brief periods of time, specifically to avoid the mental exhaustion. If you want to avoid mental exhaustion, you should read for brief periods of time, because when we read something extensively, we read a particular text, or when we read a particular chapter intensively, we require most mental energy. We focus upon each and every word. We focus on everything. So this all process of reading, this all intensive reading process requires most mental energy. And when you focus upon each and everything, there are lots of possibilities. There are possibilities that you might not be able to avoid mental exhaustion. That is why it is said that you should read for brief periods of time in order to avoid mental exhaustion. Objectives of intensive reading: to make a detailed study of words, phrases, word order, and expressions. An intensive reading, we study different words, we study phrases, we study word order, and we study different expressions in detail. To enable the students to comprehend the text, we try to first of all understand and comprehend the text, its meaning, and its sense. Our focus is upon the meaning of the text. To enable the students to improve English, when we focus upon each and every word, when we focus upon each and every aspect of language, each and every aspect of language, each and every aspect of word, each and every aspect of phrase, clause, sentence, this results in our improvement in English language, because our basic purpose is to improve our English language. When we read something intensively, this helps us improve our English language. To encourage the students to gather information from the text, we try to get more and more information from the text. Intensive reading encourages us to gather more and more information from a text. Now let's discuss some of the advantages of intensive reading. The very first advantage is it enriches our vocabulary. I've discussed this very point in the previous slide, that it enriches our vocabulary because we consult dictionary for each and every difficult word. When we consult dictionary for it, it means that we are learning that word. We memorize that word. We memorize the synonyms and antonyms of those words. We try to guess the meaning of such difficult words from the context. And when it becomes difficult for us to guess the meaning of difficult words from the context, we consult dictionary for that. We consult dictionary for it. We study the pronunciation of the word. We study the grammar of the word. We study the meaning of the word. We try to look at the synonyms and antonyms of the word. So when we read something extensively and we refer to dictionary for each and every word, it enriches our vocabulary. It improves our grammar. It improves our grammar as because we focus upon phrases, we focus upon structure of phrases, we focus upon clauses, we focus upon the structure of clauses, we focus upon sentences and the structure of different sentences. All these processes result in our improvement in grammar. Our grammar improves with intensive reading. Improves the power of expression. When your vocabulary is developed, you have large stock of word, and your grammar is developed, you know the grammar rules, it results in your improvement in the power of expression. You can express different thing in a best possible way when you have got good vocabulary and you know the grammar rules. Develop the skill of questioning and answering. It also helps you develop the skill of questioning and answering. Helps remember dates, facts, etc. as well. Disadvantages include its process is long and boring. Yes, it is very much long because you see each and everything. And it is boring as well because every reader gets bored when we look at dictionary. We consult dictionary for each and every word. This is very much boring task. It seldom imparts joy and pleasure. Okay, good. The students are interested in this method only for the point of view of examinations. Most of the time, students read different texts intensively for the purpose of passing their examinations. They read academic texts intensively, and they only read and they only apply this strategy for the point of view of examinations. When they study for their exam, they apply this very strategy. Comparison between intensive and extensive reading. Let's discuss some of the points. Intensive reading concentrates upon the language aspect. Okay, we have discussed it. It its focus is upon language. Its focus is upon words, phrases, clauses, and sentences. Words, grammar of words, structure of phrases, clauses, and structure of sentences. Whereas the focus of extensive reading is the subject matter. When we read something extensively, we try to get the overall meaning of the text. Our focus is upon subject matter, whereas in intensive reading, our focus is upon the language aspect. The second point is the aim is to make a careful and minute study of what is read, whereas the aim of extensive reading is only to grasp the meaning of what is read. Here, our focus is meaning, whereas in intensive reading, our focus is upon each and everything. The third point is words, phrases, and expressions are studied in detail. I have discussed this point in the previous slide as well, that in intensive reading we focus upon words, phrases, and expressions, whereas in extensive reading words, phrases, and expressions are not studied in detail. The fourth point is new words and phrases that you come across in a text pass into the pupil's active vocabulary. They pass into your active vocabulary. They become part of your active vocabulary. Whereas new words and phrases occurring in the book pass into the pupil's passive vocabulary. These are the references. You can check these documents and you can download these documents from these websites. Thank you for listening to the lecture. Allah Hafiz.